I like big books and I cannot lie. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about big books, chonkers. I'm really curious actually to see what people think of chonkers as well as share my thoughts on the subject. So let's start first with defining our terms. What do I mean by chonkers, by big books? Now, I've had some discussions with several friends of mine and it seems we all have different definitions. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to give you my categorization of books. A small book for me is one that is up to say 300 to 350 pages. Medium books are between 350 pages and 600 pages. Large books or chonkers are anything above 600 pages. We also need to keep in mind the format that we are reading. And I'm going to include digital books, however, it really depends how they are formatted and the e-reader we are using, the size of the e-reader, etc. as to what is a large book on a digital reader. Let's take, for example, Toll the Hounds, which is the next Malazan book I will be reading this month. It's a chonker. This paperback, and this is a regular paperback, or the paperbacks that are widely available today, is 1,296 pages. Yeah, it's basically two chonkers, really. Now, it is slightly larger than a mass paperback, as you can see. So mass paperbacks usually have more pages than the regular paperbacks, though I think for some reason the mass paperback of this, from what I can tell, has a similar page count. However, Toll the Hounds in the trade paperback, which is this size, similar in height to a hardcover, it is 1,000 pages. And in the hardcover, it is 826 pages. So you can see how the format that we are reading does change the number of pages. Doesn't change the number of words, obviously, but even so, regardless of which edition of Toll the Hounds you're reading, it is definitely a chonker. Sometimes when I pick up a hardcover and it's say $5.50, I think, oh, that's not a chonker. And then I see it in the paperback edition and I realize, well, actually it is. So that's just something else to keep in mind as we talk about chonkers. So now I'm going to share my experience and what I think of chonkers. I'm one of these people who always wants more and more in series or books that I am loving. The more time I can spend, say, with beloved characters, the happier I am. The more time I can spend in a great realized world, the happier I am. First, I thought I'd show you some examples of chonkers that I've read. Balance of Power by Richard North Patterson. He writes legal courtroom dramas or legal thrillers, if you want to call it that. This one is just over 600 pages, but it is a trade paperback. So in paperback form, there would be a lot more pages to this. It is definitely a chonker, as you can tell. Ships of Merior by Jenny Warts. This is, I think, the second and third book in the series. This is definitely a chonker. And I've read this several times. This is, I think, around 900 pages. Riders by Jilly Cooper. This is over 900 pages. This is a paperback. I have read this several times as well. It was, I think, her first book. Well, it was the first one of hers that I read, and I do love her books. And most of her books are around about this size. Towers of Midnight by Robert Jordan, the penultimate Wheel of Time book. This is, I think, around 850 pages or so. And it is definitely a chonker. And in fact, I would say all of the books in the series are chonkers. Not only are they chonkers, they're really heavy too. This is The Stand by Stephen King. Now, I have read this at least 6 or 7 times, and it is over 1,200 pages in this edition, as you can see. Definitely a chonker. The final book in the Memory, Sorrow and Thorn series by Tad Williams, To Green Angel Tower Storm. This one is 800 pages, though I don't think you would guess it looking at it. I consider this also a chonker. The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. This is around 860 pages or so, and I've read about 250. Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. I think that's how you pronounce his name. This edition is slightly less than 600 pages, but the paperback is 1,000. So I definitely consider this a chonker, but you wouldn't know, would you, by looking at it? I have not finished this. I have had it languishing for a long time now, but it is my intent to hopefully finish it this year. Now the next ones that I'm going to show you, I've got 5 here, are also chonkers that I haven't read yet. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, the first in the Stormlight Archive. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, another one I haven't read, and this is around 800 pages. Again, deceptive, isn't it? The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee, another YouTuber. You would think this one was around 1,000 pages. Apparently it's only 730 or something. So of course the type of paper used in the books can determine if there are more or less pages, as well as the font used. But I would have guessed this at 1,000 pages, and I'd be wrong. And I haven't read this yet, but I'm intending to. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. I have not read this. It is well over 800 pages though. And the last one I've got here is The Core by Peter V. Brett, the final book in the Demon Cycle series. I've read the first 4 books. I have not read this one. The reason I haven't read this yet, because I read the last book at least 4 or 5 months ago now, is because I have not been loving the series, and I was a little put off by the size of this book, this chonker. And that is one of the reasons I was inspired to make this video. How sometimes the size of a book can put you off, intimidate you to start it, because a book this size takes a lot longer to read than a small book or even a medium book. It's a larger time investment. And when you're not really loving a series, and I wasn't enjoying the Demon Cycle series towards the end, I keep hesitating to pick this up. However, if it had been half the size, I would have finished it. So size does matter, doesn't it, in choosing our books, in whether we will read them or not. Being unfamiliar with an author such as Susanna Clarke has led me to sit on this one and not read it because it is such a chonker. Now I know that a lot of people love this book, and perhaps I will as well, but I need to be ready and willing to spend the time to read this book, because it would take me a lot longer than a shorter book would. So not being familiar with an author can make me hesitate to pick up a large book. Not knowing a lot about the story can make me hesitate as well. And that is compounded by the fact that I don't often DNF books. I'm trying to be better at it, but I generally push through, even if I'm not loving the book I'm reading. So now I'm even more hesitant to pick up a book that I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy. And with authors I've read before, like Brandon Sanderson, I read The Final Empire. I didn't love it. In fact, I didn't like it. And even though a lot of people have recommended I read The Way of Kings, part of me is still a little hesitant because I didn't like the last book of his I read. And I know it's going to take me a while to read this one. So I'm not sure if I'm willing to invest that amount of time in this book. Though it may be that I will love it. I don't know yet. Another reason I may hesitate to read a chonker is that there are many books in the series, and I'm not sure if I'm willing to invest that much time on a long series or on chonker books in a series. That doesn't mean I won't pick up any of these books I'm talking about, but they're some of the reasons why I do hesitate. However, when I know the author, such as Stephen King, who is one of my all-time favorite authors, the more the better as far as I'm concerned. I don't hesitate to read his books that may be chonkers because I know I'm going to enjoy my time with it. I may not love them all equally, but that's all right. I know, however, what I'm getting into when I'm reading them, and I'm willing to invest that time because I trust him as an author. So I think that plays a large part as to whether we will pick up a chonker or not, is trusting the author. Another reason I don't hesitate with certain chonkers is they are part of a series that I'm loving, such as The Wheel of Time or Malazan currently. I'm more than happy to read another 10 books in Wheel of Time or Malazan because I'm having such a wonderful time enjoying them. And I think that goes back to being invested in the characters or the story or the world. If I am in love with the characters, if I am greatly attached to characters in a series, I don't care how many books there are, I'll read them. And if I love the world or I want to find out how this story is going to end, again, I will read the books no matter how big they are. But that doesn't happen all that often where you fall madly in love with a series, as I have, for example, with Malazan recently. But there are 10 books and I'm currently up to book 8. And I can see myself going back and rereading all of them, no matter how big they are, because I love this series so much. The same applies to The Wheel of Time. Same applies to The Dark Tower or The Stand. I'm very happy to reread chonkers because I know what I'm getting and I know I've loved that book and I will love my time with it yet again. And I think another reason why some people may not like chonkers is they don't read a lot of books, and a large, thick book is a time investment which some people may not be willing to give. But for those who read a lot, and I think I read a fair few books a year, size doesn't really matter, especially when I know what I'm getting into. But when it comes to new authors, I may take my time before I decide to pick up that book. And of course, whether you pick up a chonker or not may also depend on what is happening in your own life. You may be too busy to wait weeks and weeks or months before you can finish a book. You may want a quick fix. And that's what's great about shorter books or short books is you can get to the end, to a satisfying end, much quicker than you can with a long one. And another very important factor regarding chonkers is that they also vary depending on the writing style. Stephen King, for example, I find very easy to read, and I find his books very quick reads for me. I cannot say that, for example, about the Malazan books. They take a lot longer for me to read, even if they are the same page count, because the writing is denser, because the sentence structure is more complex, because of the ideas or concepts that Erikson is exploring. I find it can take me several weeks to read one of his books, and yet a book of similar length by King I can read in half that time. So of course the writing does play a factor in whether we will pick up a chonker or not. For example, David Copperfield by Dickens. I haven't read this yet because I know the language is going to be different, not as straightforward as, say, a King book or one of my legal thrillers or mysteries that I read. This is going to have more archaic language. It may take me longer to get through the book. And when it is a chonker like this, I think, yeah, I'm not quite ready for that. However, if it had been a smaller book, I probably would have read it by now. And then, of course, there's also the fact that you can spend weeks or days or months reading a chonker to find that it wasn't worthwhile. Yeah, they're the worst actually, because you've spent so much time on this book. And there is no doubt that some books are bloated. There have been quite a few that I felt, yeah, they could have been edited a little bit more, had certain parts excluded because they didn't really advance the story or the characters' arcs. And sometimes I feel like half of this book I could have done without. The most recent one I can remember, and I know this has happened more than once, was Nosferatu by Joe Hill. Now, I really enjoyed that, but I felt that it could have been condensed by a third, and I would have liked it even more. One last thing I wanted to mention is, now being older, being in my 60s, I'm more reluctant to spend time on large or chonker books that I'm not sure I will like. Whereas when I was younger, I was much more willing to take a risk on a book. Now I want to feel confident that I'm going to like that book if I'm going to spend that much time reading it. So to recap, I am reluctant to read a chonker by an author I don't know, or one who hasn't quite got my trust, because I've read something else of theirs that I haven't loved. On the other hand, when it's an author I know and love, yeah, I don't care if it's 2,000 pages, I'll read it. Stephen King could write a 5,000 page book and I will read it. So trusting an author, I think, plays a major part for me as to whether I will read chonkers or not. But again, if I'm not in the right mood for a large book, I may even wait on a Stephen King book or choose one of his smaller ones, because I just don't want to spend days or weeks reading a book. Sometimes I just want my quick fix, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do love chonkers by my favourite authors. I love chonkers in series that I'm thoroughly enjoying, if not loving. But I can understand some people finding long series intimidating, off-putting, because we know how much time is going to go into reading them. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. That is my thoughts on chonkers. Now, of course, I'm very curious to hear what you think of chonkers. Do you read them? Do you avoid them? Do you love them? Do you hate them? You know, I always want to hear your opinions, and you can let me know down in the comments. Thank you all very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then you know what to do, right? I don't need to tell you. Well, I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.